We prefer to be able to bring really interesting coffees from lesser well-known places. Malawi's one. It's normally seen as a tea growing area. Uganda is only of the last 10 or 15 years really come up in the world. Rwanda is the same. Even Burundi. Traveled, you know, people go, oh, these poor people or whatever, and yes, they are poor in relative terms, but they actually probably live richer lives. You know. It's just that Burundi coffee's, it's great, but it's not always regularly available. So I'd hate people to be getting hooked in to coffees of that ilk. Yes. And then you get unusual coffees like this Hurrah, for instance, is a coffee that people either like or they don't. And it's dry processed coffee. So basically the coffee cherries are taken off the trees and they're left on drying racks like dried fruit, okay? It's a much longer process, but the fruit stays in contact with the bean for a much longer period, so you get a much richer, smoother coffee with kind of mocha undertones to it. That you go and pluck the cherries from the trees that are part of their little plot, which might only be 500 square meters or something like that, but it's theirs. Now, Uganda has been under its own rule for over 50 years, probably close to 55 now. And Kampala, you could see their vestiges that it must have been a beautiful city at one point because there's trees and it's that kind of a lush environment. But I mean, it's half the roads are buggered. I mean, we think our potholes are bad. So then you travel from there, and Iris and I were in the Ginger area, which is one of the supposed sources of the Nile. Nobody really knows for sure. So there we are, that's fine. So then I said, let's go. We must go to Mbali, which is the main growing area for coffee. It's called the Bugisu area. And so we travel along there. And the road, it's fine from Ginger to the Kenyan border, because there's a lot of traffic that travels there, and it's not like South Africa where you've got alternate routes. That's your route. Then we turn up to the Mbali Road, the second biggest city in Uganda, and the road is like suddenly you have to go off and walk. You're traveling on the side of the road, and sometimes it's smooth and sometimes it isn't. And we get to Mbali, and we arrive there, and we say, listen, we want to go to the coffee area. So we're kind of getting a blank look from the receptionist, just like these two Mzungu women. What in the hell do they know? And we're saying, do you have somebody who could maybe take us there? But we had a car. The guy we booked him, but he never pitched. So we took ourselves on this little trip, and we travel on the way. And fortunately we had a map, because the GPS is just like a complete, it's an anathema once you've gone like 30 clicks out of the place. And we see the police on the side of the road, and we said, listen, we're going to Sipi Falls, but we don't seem to be able to follow directions very well. So the guy said, don't worry, and then he hails a guy who he knows is going to Sipi Falls. He said, you just follow him. And thank God, because there would absolutely not even one single direction. I mean, we would have been completely lost and still driving around. And he took us to the Sipi Falls Lodge. Nice. And on the route, just for the record, we were looking for coffee. And coffee, we know what coffee trees look like. We were looking for these lovely coffee plantations. And, you look, and then you'd see maize plants, and then cassava and guavas, and, all of these things. And then eventually we get to the Sipi Falls Lodge, and we say, where are the coffee trees? He says, no, you've got to look in between the maize and the bananas, and sure as hell there were millions of the bloody things. It was just all growing haphazardly, cultivated haphazardly, I'm sure just by seed, that happen to land on the ground.
About, I mean, just the way I'm picturing it, but it's almost like an integrated farm in that it's not a monoculture. So we berate the way corn is grown, etc., but not necessarily put the same pressure on monocultures of coffee or tea or something. Not to the same extent anyway.
Yeah.
And something quite cool about the idea of this naturally seeded coffee plantation.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's it. And I mean, the other
Yeah.
thing about it is that it is organic because they can't afford to add anything. Yeah, it's more resilient. And also in those higher areas, you know, because Sipi Falls is, I can't remember exactly, but it's about 1,700 meters above sea level. So it's higher than Joburg for sure, maybe even higher than that. And there are less bugs in that environment, you know.
Have you seen coffee that's cultivated in rows, neat?
Yes, yes.
So which other ones are grown like in that very natural type of way, like the Sipi Falls, or like the
Well, like Malawi's another one.
Okay.
You know, that one, the Mzuzu area, which is on the border of Tanzania.
Okay.
You know, that one again is another cooperative farmer scenario.
It's almost like that's wild coffee. There's a theme there. Would that blend with the Sipi? The Malawi?
Yes, actually it would.
Well-
They're very, both of them are gentle coffees.
Uh-huh.
They're not as fruity as you'd get from like a Rwanda, which I don't have a pack of here, but
Okay.
or any of the Ethiopians like this. The yoga chef is very fruity.
Okay.
It's in a bit of like cherry fruitiness, so there's a little bit of pizzazz, and it's cultivated in a more, you know,
Refined,
conventional way,
conventional.
or cultivated way, or I don't know how you'd describe it.
Well, I think we said Sipi Falls is more like a wild, so it's it's less wild.
Yes.
Yeah.
That makes
So,
sense.
Yeah. I like that, because so you're saying if we win Malawi, it would be a bit too much of the same, or you're not going to get too much of that.
yeah,
that
you won't
surprise.
get a difference,
Okay,
and the
change
taste
the
profiles aren't.
Yeah, the taste
You
profiles.
know,
are
maybe
the
it's
same.
a secondary thing to think about is a Malawi maybe with a Rwanda or whatever at a later stage. Tanzania actually is more of those lovely cultivated rows. You know, it's on the foothills of Mount Kilimanjaro, so you know everybody in South Africa knows that. So it's also a bit of a story about places where a mountain they might wish to climb at some point, but maybe the coffee estates that they could also be seeing at the same time. We actually have been to in Arusha, which is the big safari capital, to the Kamemo estate there, and that there it's like chalk and cheese. So you walk down these pristine rows, and you know everything is very organized. They actually bring in proper experts who have skills, like pruning a coffee tree is not just about like hack. You actually have to do it in such a way that it's going to maximize the number of cherries that plant can possibly produce. And if it isn't done expertly, that in itself can stuff up the whole crop. And you know, I think it's about 45 processes from the time that seed is actually germinated in the soil to when it's finally put into a cup.